Hi, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of our Azure Weekly Webinars. And today's topic is about Windows Server and SQL Server 2008 end of support. It's coming, and what should you do? As usual, my name is Herns Hermida. I'm the Cloud and Enterprise Business Lead here for Microsoft Philippines. If this is the first time for you to attend this webinar, there are a few reminders that you may want to take note of. This webinar is entirely broadcasted over the internet using the On24 platform using your browser, and you are listening to this live. So if you have any questions during the conduct of this webinar, just put it into the Q&A window or the chat window, and we will try to answer those questions as quickly and as much as we can. If we are not able to answer your questions, we'll make sure that we log it in and we'll reach out to you via email, or you can also reach out to me via email. My email contacts are there at the bottom if you have any questions that may pop out during this webinar that we were not able to answer to. This entire webinar is also recorded, so from the beginning to the end. So you will get an URL, or sorry, an email with the URL to the recording of this entire webinar once the webinar is already done, so you can listen to it using the device of your choice, using a time of date of your choosing, so you don't have to listen to this live the entire time, especially if, for example, you missed the first bits because you were late. That's fine because you're going to get a recording of this entire thing. Okay, so let's get going. You hear of the word EOS. EOS essentially means end of support. This means that Microsoft will no longer provide security updates and will no longer provide any patches or documentation for the said product when it goes to end of support. SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 has ended its extended support last July 2019. So we are now close to a month after the date when SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 has already ended their support. Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 extended support will end on January 14, 2020. So other than the fact that Microsoft is no longer going to give you any security updates, which opens up compliance concerns for any applications or any data that is hosted on these two expiring platforms, it also is consider this as a missed innovation opportunity as well, because a lot of people, as a lot of our customers, consider end of support as an opportunity for them to modernize their applications. You want to avoid your business disruptions because we've heard of a lot of news. You've heard of a lot of news of security updates not being available on certain platforms, being opening yourself up to the bad guys, to the hackers, so to speak. So this will open yourself up to your records probably being stolen. You're losing customers during an attack, and also, of course, the loss of reputation, and cybercrime continues to increase over the years. And as you probably heard from the news again, a number of these cyber attacks happen when customers on platforms, for example, that whose support has already expired. We also need to be aware that there are certain privacy standards, like for example, the European GDPR and the Local Data Privacy Act, that penalizes us in case, for example, the data that we are hosting is stolen or is otherwise compromised. So we have to make sure that we run on the forms. Now, what are your options to manage end of support for 2008 and 2008 R2 workloads, both on Windows Server and SQL Server? On the left side, you will see here your options for the cloud. If you migrate your applications to Azure VMs, meaning you lift and shift it as is, no changes to the code, no changes to the application, no changes even to the operating system or the underlying database, which can remain on 2008 and 2008 R2 versions. When you move them to Azure VMs or virtual machines, you get 3 years of extended security updates for Windows Server and Windows Server 2008 R2, and also SQL Server at no additional charge. When you migrate data to Azure Managed Instances or VMs, you also get the same thing. You get 3 more years of extended security updates. So we have a lot of customers that are currently doing this. For example, they're not ready yet to modernize their platform. Their solution or their application still remains on 2008, but they don't want to risk their companies. They don't want to risk the data that is in these EOS platforms to be stolen or to be otherwise compromised. So they move them to Azure. So the added bonus there is that you get free 3 years security updates for those platforms as long as they run on Azure. And then you modernize when ready. So once you already get there, you can start modernizing to Azure or transform your applications and data with different various Azure services. If you want to remain on-premise, look at the right side of the screen. then you have to update to the latest version. So that'll be Windows Server 2016 or 2019, or Windows Server 2017, or the upcoming version of SQL Server, which is SQL Server 2019. If you really can't meet the deadline and if you remain on-premise, you have to buy extended security updates to get 3 more years of security updates for both expiring platforms. Now, a lot of people ask me what is the cost of extended security updates. So the extended security update cost is around 75% of a standard SQL Server or Windows Server license cost. Plus, you also need to have software assurance. You cannot apply or you cannot acquire extended security updates if you don't have your software assurance currently current. And then once you've already done that, so you continue to get coverage from Microsoft by paying for the extended security updates for the next 3 years. During that period, then you can upgrade or move to the cloud when you're ready. Specifically for the data platform modernization options, if let's say you are currently running SQL Server 2008 or even other expiring or end of support platforms for other vendors such as Oracle or MySQL, you have several choices. When you go to the cloud, you have different Azure databases such as Azure SQL Database, which is a managed SQL database. Exactly how a on-premise SQL Server 2019 database runs on-prem, except that this is a managed service. Or if you want to move to a if you want to move to the open source database, or if you are currently on open source database, we also have a managed MySQL and Postgre service, and we call that Azure Database for MySQL and Postgre that's currently running on Azure. And these are based on the current community versions of MySQL and Postgre, and because they run on Azure, they're actually managed by Microsoft. If you're currently running these platforms as a data warehouse, you can definitely move them to the Azure SQL Data Warehouse service. And if you want to move to a NoSQL platform, our NoSQL platform is called Azure Cosmos DB. This is a managed NoSQL platform. So all of these are different managed services as you see there on the top. Now you can also you can also remain on-prem. So the latest version of SQL Server in the market today is SQL Server 2017. You can definitely modernize your existing database to SQL Server 2017, or you can take a preview of SQL Server 2019. And there are several options. Like for example, starting in SQL Server 2017, you can run this on both Linux, and we support the major distros of Linux such as Red Hat Red Hat and SUSE Linux, or you can continue to run on Windows. Now, when you weigh your options to when you start weighing options when it's time to move to the cloud, when you want to migrate for Azure, there are actually again two sub options here. You might simply just want to rehost. This is similar to the approach that I just talked to you that I just talked about a while ago. This is lifting and shifting your current application. So like I said, the current Windows Server 2008 server or our 2008 R2, you just move it to the Azure VM, and we have several migration tools that can allow you to do lift and shift with no changes to the code. That is still going to be supported in Azure, and like I said, there's going to be a bonus of 3 years of extended support once you do that. Or you can immediately refactor, re-architect, or rebuild. So refactoring means that you are changing some parts of the application to take advantage or leverage some Azure platform as a service or PaaS services. You can also completely re-architect the solution to use the same PaaS components, or you can simply just dump the application and rebuild a new one. But the advantage here is now you're future-proofing the application because you're innovating with platform as a service services such as, for example, mobile services, web services, containers, and other Azure services similarly. For if you want to upgrade your applications on premise, you can upgrade to the latest version of Windows Server, which is Windows Server 2016. Now, often a question that's being asked is that which one actually costs less. If you go through this continuum, if you follow the slide from top to bottom, the least cost is using PaaS and SaaS because we have a number of customers who have we have a number of customers and the best who have said and the best way kind of optimize your usage for the cloud is actually not to use standard IaaS like compute network and storage or virtual machines, because over time IaaS will become expensive. It's like running your data center, except that it's running on the cloud. But the thing is, in IaaS you have to manage a lot more things, so therefore it requires a lot more administration compared to PaaS and SaaS. So if we, let's say, if we take the example of a website, for instance, that's currently running on Windows Server 2008, you can choose to just take the code of the website and run it using PaaS services such as Azure Web Services, or containerize the code and run it on Azure Container Service. The services that are required to run those platforms are actually being managed and run by Microsoft itself. All you need to do is to supply the code. Whereas if you take the IaaS approach, you will be given a virtual machine and you'd have to configure the operating system and the application server that would run your website code yourself. So the administration becomes a little bit higher. And of course, the most expensive ones is if you want to stay physical in your own data center, because the cost of running the data center and maintaining the data center, including operating systems, networking, and everything else, will be borne by now, if we change gears a little bit on the data platform, the good thing about using Azure Data Services is that you can actually use the different Azure Data Services like Azure SQL Database, SQL Data Warehouse, Manage MySQL, Manage Postgre, and everything else. You can use them as operational databases, you can use them as data lakes, and you can also use them as data warehouses. And you can see there the advantages of using our data services compared to doing it on-prem. The other thing is that you can reason over the data anytime, anywhere. AI is built in because we already have modules that you can create advanced and machine learning algorithms using R and Python, and that R and Python advanced analytics algorithms are actually are running on top of your database, and it doesn't have to be a separate system. You have the flexibility of choice because you can run in any language, and any platform, anywhere, and security and privacy because you're running on Azure. You're secured because we have more certification than any other cloud. For SQL Server, if you remain on-prem, the latest version of SQL Server is SQL Server 2017, but we do have SQL Server 2019 that's currently on preview. It's been the industry leader for 4 years in a row. We have surpassed Oracle in terms of both ability to execute and completeness of vision in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We've proven the performance of the SQL Server as a platform as a data warehouse, and we've also incorporated data lake capabilities into SQL servers, wherein now you can use T-SQL queries to query over any data, whether they are structured or unstructured. It's also the most secure database platform for the last 7 years, as provided for as data by the NIST. Now, the great thing about using our the Azure and SQL Server data platform is that you can actually form a hybrid data platform. So we've seen many examples of customers splitting their data across Azure in the different Azure database services, or putting it on-premise on Azure or on SQL Server. The one of the advantages there is that you can take advantage of things such as security and privacy, VNet isolation, single tool set to manage both databases on the premise or on the cloud. You can split your data. So some customers have decided to, for example, put their customer data on-prem but put their analytics data on the cloud. That's perfectly fine, because insights and our different cloud scale analytics capabilities can scale across on-premise or on the cloud. Now, these are the different Azure database services. Starting from left to right on the top, you can still run SQL Server in Azure virtual machines. That Azure virtual machine can run on Linux or can run on Windows Server, and you can choose to run SQL Server there as if it is a SQL Server running on an ordinary server in your physical data center. But if you don't want to fiddle around or worry about the actual administration of the IaaS environment, you can choose to use the Azure SQL database. It is the same SQL database, but the thing is that we've configured this to be a database as a service, quote unquote, or as a managed service that's provided for by Microsoft. The only thing that you need to do is create your tables, create your objects, and then connect your applications. And the way you pay for the services is based on the amount of storage and amount of throughput that you require. Now, the same approach is taken with Azure Cosmos DB. In this case, if you have, for example, transactional websites, And you don't want a full-blown SQL Server relational database to store mere website transactions, but rather use a NoSQL database. So that's what Azure Cosmos DB is for. And then finally, we have Azure SQL Data Warehouse, which is specifically designed to store Azure to prepare Azure data warehouse data for ingestion and also for further analysis using data warehouse tools such as the ones that are in Azure or from third parties. And we've embraced open source. MySQL and Postgre are now also available as managed services on Azure as well. So if you're currently using MySQL or Postgre, you don't necessarily need to move to SQL Server. You can remain on those open source database systems. And then you can use the migrate tools to migrate your data across MySQL on-prem to MySQL on the cloud. And because these are managed services, the other stuff that you have to worry about that usually becomes a problem in on-premise databases, such as security, hardening of the operating system and such, is now being done by Microsoft as managed. Okay, sorry, I went ahead of my slide over here, but the MySQL and the Postgres service is based on the community versions, the latest community versions of MySQL and Postgres. It's fully managed, fully patched, fully secure. It's the HA, the high availability capabilities have now been configured by Microsoft. The other great advantage here is that you can scale up in minutes and you don't have to fiddle around with operating system parameters that you normally have to worry about when you try to build high availability SQL, MySQL or Postgre on premise. Um, you can migrate the usual applications that rely on these databases, such as WordPress or Drupal or any type of operating system or any type of application that runs open source. Azure Cosmos DB is our globally distributed multimodal NoSQL database that emulates the behavior of things like MongoDB, Gremlin, and Node.js. It's a multi-model data. You can elastically scale and store throughput. We guarantee as part of the SLA less than 10 milliseconds in the 99th percentile. This type of NoSQL database is ideal for large, massive, and fast storage requirements that are typical for IoT applications, gaming, and e-commerce or website. Now, just to shift gears a bit and to give you some idea on SQL Server 2019, this is still under preview if I'm not mistaken. This is our new version of our industry-leading performing SQL Server databases. One of the great things that you can do with SQL Server 2019 is right here in this slide. So one of them is to provide intelligence over any data. AI and machine learning can run over on top of your data, whether you create it using R, Python, or Spark. So Spark is a new thing for SQL Server 2019. You can again install SQL Server 2019 on Linux, run it over Windows Server, you can even run it on containers. And you have a choice of platform and language. It still continues to provide industry-leading performance. It's the most secure for the last 8 years. And Power BI and SQL Server reporting services are actually built into the SQL Server database. You don't have to buy a separate license for this. So a lot of people, for example, use Power BI, but with the Power BI reporting server being built into SQL Server 2019, you can have a choice between the standard SQL Server reporting service, SSRS, or Power BI to deliver your business insights and dashboarding requirements. Now, shifting gears again, let's go back to VM. So let's say, for example, you have a Windows Server 2008 or 2008 R2 application, and you want to lift and shift. You would typically need to, of course, build a virtual machine. The virtual machine compute options that we currently have in Azure is quite numerous. So we have a number of options. So you can choose virtual machine scale sets, where VMs automatically scale according to the workload that it's currently experiencing. Availability sets, where your applications has the resiliency and is replicated across multiple geographical regions. Geographical regions. We have different compute options for all types. So we have the A series virtual machines, for example, that can start from 1 core all the way up to virtual machines that are specific for high performance computing using the latest chipsets from Intel and AMD. And we also have virtual machines that are specifically or purpose built to run SAP HANA. For some types of environments where customers will require memory optimized virtual machines, we also have that as well, and also graphic intensive machines for customers who would need a lot of graphics rendering for their applications. If you choose to remain on-prem, the latest version of Windows Server is currently Windows Server 2019. Although the topic of this webinar is not really Windows Server 2019, I'd like to spend a few minutes showing to you what are the different capabilities of Windows Server 2019. So you can see it here in front of your screen. There's unique hybrid capabilities with Azure, meaning it has capabilities that inherently part of the operating system that can allow you to extend the operation of this OS all the way up to Azure. Advanced multi-layer security, faster innovation for applications, and unprecedented hyperconverged infrastructure. As a hybrid data center platform, you can extend your data center to cloud. So meaning you can, sorry, I'll go back. You can extend your data center to the cloud. So for example, capabilities such as Azure Backup, the ability to span your virtual machines from Hyper-V on-prem to the cloud is also now built into Windows Server 2019. So Azure Backup is also natively integrated into Azure. So as you can see here, this is a screenshot of the Windows Admin Center. So once you've configured this Windows Admin Center with your Azure subscription, you have a single browser-based view of Windows Server workloads that are both running on-premise and Azure. So think of this as a single management window where you can see the performance of all of your workloads and your virtual machines across your Hyper-V on-premise and also your virtual machines that are currently running on Azure. So it simplifies everything from setup and VM machine data transfer to checks. What are some of the security capabilities of Windows Server 2019? So we have, for example, continue to use managed privilege identities to give administrators just enough administration, so you can be very granular as far as what type of administration tasks you can give to certain administration, and you can even limit the amount of time that these administrators can do those said tasks. Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection is a built-in feature of the operating system itself. So as long as it is connected to our intelligent graph services, it can defend itself from zero-day attacks and other attacks that may be emerging in the future. You can run Linux inside a protected virtual machine with shielded VMs for Linux. This is something new for Windows Server 2019. We used to provide shielded VMs only for Windows Server virtual machines. Now we've extended that capability over to Linux virtual machines as well. So this shielded VMs means that your VMs are protected against other VMs in the case of a security incident. We improved container support because we now provide Kubernetes support within the operating system. Red Hat OpenShift container platform is also a natively supported platform. Our friends from Red Hat, for example, have worked with us very closely to make sure that their container platform works natively on top of Windows Server. And then we've also further optimized the images for server core and nano server, which means that the footprint of the server, once it's installed as core or nano server mode, becomes smaller as well. How did we improve Linux support? We now support tools such as OpenSSH, curl, and tar, and we've improved the operating system by creating a separate subsystem just to run Linux virtual machines. Now, one of the new things in Windows Server 2019 that you probably have heard for the first time is that we now provide better support for hyperconverged infrastructure, or HCI. Now, if you don't know what HCI is, this is a great slide that kind of introduces the concept. Well, in the old days, when you create a server farm, each rack will have a combination of compute nodes. So as you can see here, you have the hypervisor that would run some sort of virtualization engine or hypervisor such as VMware or Hyper-V. You got the storage fabric and the SAN on the bottom. You got miscellaneous appliances like KVM switches and the Ethernet switches on the top. Now, all of our hardware partners such as Dell, HP, Supermicro, Lenovo, and everybody else, they have now engineered their computing environments to become hyperconverged, meaning in a single appliance, They're using standard x86 servers with local drives, and we use the magic of software. Everything is now software defined networking, software defined compute, and software defined storage. And all you need to do is just plug the thing and then connect it to the network through the separate Ethernet switches that are available in the appliance. So, how do we support HCI infrastructures now in Windows Server 2019? So we still have Hyper-V, which is still our hypervisor and virtual machine platform that powers all of Azure. Storage Service Direct, which we introduced in Windows Server 2019, is just now the foundation of Azure Stack, which allows you to define SAN-like environments within standard storage, whether it's standard HDD or SDD or SSD, and then software-defined networking as well. So HCI, our HCI partners can be from the people from the right side, like DataOn, Dell EMC, Fujitsu, HP, Inspur, Supermicro, etc. So if you look through the website here on the right side, you can see the different HCI appliances that they have. They're super small, they're super affordable as well. The whole point here is that Windows Server 2019 is now supporting these hardware environments as default. And we've also simplified HCI management. As part of Windows Admin Center, which you saw a while ago, we also now have a tab that allows you to manage Windows Server 2016 or 2017 with the hybrid cloud integration built in. So it kind of talks to the machine that Windows Server 2019 is currently hosted in, so that you can see HCI capabilities and manage them across a single pane of glass as well. Right. Now that we have seen the option, so we're halfway through the webinar, so let's try to review a little bit on what we just talked about. So we all know that SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2, as well as Windows Server and Windows Server 2008 R2, are going to are going to be at end of support. SQL Server is already at end of support, and Windows Server 2008 R2 will be end of support in January 2020. Now you have several options. You can lift and shift them up as is to Azure, which means that you can get extended 3-year security once they are up in Azure, or you can simply you can refactor, re-architect, or even rebuild the application to take advantage of the modern PaaS capabilities of Azure. If you decide to remain on-premise, then you'd have to upgrade the SQL Server to SQL Server 2017 or 19 when it gets released. Or in the case of Windows Server, you'd have to upgrade to Windows Server 2019 or remain on-premise at the current EOS versions, but you'd have to pay Microsoft for something called extended security updates. And we've talked about the different capabilities of SQL Server 2019, Windows Server 2019, and got an overview of the different compute and the Azure Data Services capabilities that are currently on Azure. So now, let me talk about the different tools that you would typically use in your migration journey. And we have a lot of them. We have the SQL Server Migration Assistance, which migrates database migration to SQL Server from the different sources. It may be Oracle, it can be MySQL, or SQL Server old version. Data Migration Assistant is a tool that enables upgrade to SQL Server and Azure SQL Database. We also have the Azure SQL Database Managed Migration Service, or Azure DMS, which accelerates the migration of your data from on-premise to the SQL Database Managed instance, or the Azure SQL Database, which is the managed instance, or you wanna migrate that to SQL Server that runs on a VM as long as it's in the latest version. Let's talk about Azure Hybrid Benefit for SQL Server. Let's skip that for now because I have a better and longer discussion later. So this is how the Azure Database Migration Service works. It's actually a service on Azure. So once you've already signed up on Azure, this is what the Azure portal looks like. So once you've accessed the ADMS service, you just simply define the server name of your source, what type of authentication, what username to connect to. Then define the project name. Then define the destination of where you're going to bring your database. Is it a managed SQL Server or a SQL Server instance that's running on a virtual machine where you installed it yourself? So once you've entered all that information, you can start the migration. You can even choose how do you want to validate the SQL Server once it's already migrated. You can do schema comparison, data consistency, or query correctness. The next slide the next window will then start the migration itself. You can watch the progress. Um, this works kind of 98 to 99% of the time because we find that in some older databases, there are some objects there like triggers and stored procedures, for example, that are no longer supported in the latest version of SQL Server. But the tool will actually tell you which one of these routines are no longer supported in the latest version so that you can make adjustments once a majority of the objects have already been migrated. The tool that we use to migrate virtual machines, so let's say you have an existing virtual machine that's currently running VMware or Hyper-V, the first party tool that we use is called Azure Migrate. What it does is that it discovers both Hyper-V and VMware VM and applications. It gives you a report that shows you the potential sizes of Azure virtual machines and storage that will require these virtual machines once they are migrated to Azure. It also gives you an estimated monthly run cost in Azure. It also gives you migration risks and recommended tools. It's all in one good report so that before you actually do the migration itself, you will know what to expect. Like there are certain virtual machine sizes, for example, that you currently have on premise that are not supported on the cloud, or that are not supported on Azure, or maybe either too small or too big, and we don't have an equivalent VM size. Um, a lot of customers use this tool to somehow create a report for their technical decision makers to go ahead with the migration, or with their business decision makers to show them how much it's going to cost and how much effort it will take to migrate their VMs from on-premise to Azure. And I'd like to also mention that these are just first-party tools. These are tools that are provided for by Microsoft, but there are a myriad of other tools that are available out there that you can use to migrate databases or migrate VMs and applications to the cloud. So some examples are Cloud Demise, Unify Cloud, and tools like that. So these are other tools that are provided outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, but they are partners and they are certified to run on both on-premise and Azure environments so that you can use them for migration. So like I said a while ago, Azure Migrate Discovery and Assessment it's an agentless VM discovery. It'll even tell you, for example, what are the dependencies between different VMs so that you migrate VMs at the right order, because some VMs are dependent on other VMs, or should I say the applications inside those VMs are dependent on one or the other. So therefore, um, you'd have to make sure that you migrate one first before the other to not destroy all those chain dependencies. It gives you a cost analysis for budgeting. So you might be asked how much you're going to allocate for Azure once you've migrated all of your VMs. So this will give you a comprehensive report on how much it's going to cost. It also does Azure readiness assessments. It does deep assessment of VMs to determine Azure compatibility. Is there anything inside the VM that's probably not going to be able to work properly on Azure? So it will also flag you on these things before, and allows you to fix it or remedy it even before you actually move anything to Azure. Okay. So let's now go to something called Azure Hybrid Benefits, or AHUB, or what we normally call as AHB. So Azure Hybrid Benefits think of it as a discount exclusively for Azure customers. So the headline that you see there is actually true. You can save up to 55% in costs in Azure for Windows Server and SQL Server workload. How does this work? Let's start with Windows Server first on the left side. Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server is a benefit that is exclusive for customers who currently have active software assurance for Windows Server, which means that you can convert or reuse your Windows licensing with active software assurance for IaaS, and so therefore you significantly reduce your cost. For SQL Server, which is the right side of the slide, for customers who has active SQL Server software assurance, you use this SA to convert SQL licensing to save up on Azure for IaaS or PaaS. Okay, so again, the prerequisite here is that you should have an active software assurance for Windows Server or SQL Server so that you can get discounts on Azure once you've already migrated this workload to Azure. Now, common question that I get at this point is that, hey, Herns, what if, for example, I don't have software assurance right now? What's my option? Well, the option, the good thing is now you can now subscribe to Windows Server and SQL Server from any of our cost cloud solution partners, and part of that subscription already includes software assurance. So you can use that as well. Now, how does this apply? So here's an example, which is hopefully more clear. So let's say you are a customer with an active software assurance with Windows Server. And let's say you want to move one of your VMs to a Windows Server, a D4 V2 Windows Server virtual machine with 8 cores. That usually, let's say the estimate of that cost is, let's say the cost of that virtual machine is $8,600 per year. Now, because you have active software assurance, you only pay for the base virtual machine rate of the virtual machine, meaning the operating system component of the cost is no longer charged to you because you have software assurance. So therefore, your cost reduces from 8.6 annually to about $4,000 annually, or a 55% discount. It will also be different if your SA is on Windows Server Data Center or Windows Server Standard. So if you are running Windows Server Standard, you can convert Windows Server on up to 2 VMs and up to 16 cores in Azure, but you can only run virtual machines either on-premise or in Azure. So the example here is that if, let's say, you have a Windows Server Standard 16 cores with SA, you can create 2 VMs of up to 8 cores each, or 1 VM of up to 16 cores, and you will get the discount on whatever the cost of that VM would be. But you can only run it on Azure. It's going to be different if you are using Windows Server Data Center. If, let's say, you have a Windows Server Data Center with 16 cores with SA, you can reuse the Windows Server up to 2 VMs of 8 cores each, or 1 VM of up to 16 cores. And you can run the VM on both on-premise and in Azure. So you can continue to run this thing on-premise, but then you can create a new virtual machine on Azure using, let's say, one 16-core machine, get a discount, but still continue to use both VMs on the cloud and on-premise. So we also have something called Azure Reserve Instance. What is an Azure Reserve Instance? So let's say, so here's a good example. When you create a Windows Server VM on Azure, you do usually a pay-as-you-go, meaning we meter the usage of that Azure of that virtual machine. But assuming that you're going to run the virtual machine 24/7, all days in a month and all months in the year by 365, you can say, and then let's say, for example, you have software assurance, and you apply apply Azure Hybrid Benefit, you get, say, a 49% discount. Now you can actually tell Microsoft, and that you can actually say to Microsoft, hey, you know what? I'm going to use this virtual machine all year round. I'm not going to shut it down anyway. Can I reserve this instance? When you do a reserve instance, your discount goes from 49% to 80%. Okay, so you now have kind of reserved that you pre-purchased, or you paid Microsoft in advance for that virtual machine, but since you have Azure Hybrid Benefit, you get a further discount, and because you reserve, that discount goes higher from 49% to 80%. So you can combine both Hybrid Benefit and this. Now let's switch gears and talk about how hybrid benefits work for SQL Server. Now note that hybrid benefit again works only for active SA on SQL Server cores. So it doesn't work for for customers who are using SQL Server server-based license with CALs. It applies to both SQL on IaaS, meaning SQL Server running on virtual machines, or PaaS, or if you're using SQL Server managed instance. So let's see how that works in subsequent slides. So this is how it works. So let's say you have SQL Server Enterprise Core, and you've decided to migrate the SQL Server Enterprise Core on Azure by using the Azure SQL Database Managed instance. One of your core licenses is equivalent to 4 virtual cores. So meaning if you have 4 SQL Server Enterprise core licenses for 4 core licenses, 4 core licenses, then you can actually create a Azure SQL database instance of 16 cores, and then migrate your data there using the Azure Database Migration Service. Okay, if you have SQL Server Standard, on the other hand, then that is a one-to-one corresponding exchange, if you will. The other here is that, so again, this is how it works. So let's say, for example, you have SQL Server, and then you've decided to use the managed SQL Server uh, database instance. And then you've chosen business critical 8 cores US West 730 hours per month. That typically will cost you close to about $4,000 per month. If you go to the portal and say, I do have SA or software assurance and I want to apply my Azure hybrid benefit, that cost goes down from 4,000 to something closer to something less than $1,800. So straightforward. If you have software assurance that's currently active, you can apply for a discount through a hybrid benefit. So how do you? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that the reserve instances concept also applies for SQL Server as well. So remember that one slide that I showed you before, where in Windows Server you have a example a 49% discount if you apply Azure Hybrid Benefit, which escalates to 80% once you do reserve instances. You can do the same for SQL Server. You can get a discount, say 40% when you apply for Hybrid Benefit, and when you do a reserve instance for that SQL Server, your discount can escalate up to 80%. How do you activate your hybrid benefit for SQL Server, specifically for the managed service for PaaS? You can just simply go to the portal. When you go to the portal, when you select your pricing tier, it will ask you a question. Do you have SQL Server licenses with SA? If you say yes, then you will notice and once you do the sliders here from once you move the slider to choose the number of vCores and the max and data sizes, you will notice that the cost of your estimated cost of the instance that you're trying to create will actually lessen if you choose yes. Now, the discounts for a hybrid benefit can vary between 30% to 55%. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the size of the virtual machine or the size of the SQL managed instance or which region. And if you apply reserve instances, there's also higher discounts if you reserve for 3 years versus 1 year, etc. Uh, so you have multiple options there. Other ways of activating the benefit for SQL and Windows is to use the bring your own license gallery image in the Azure Marketplace, and then update the VM using PowerShell. There is a specific PowerShell script that you have to run to indicate that once the VM gets installed as an image, it will be charging you the discounted rate instead of the full rate. To use the Azure Hybrid benefit for SQL only, for those customers running on Linux, you can use the SQL gallery images, or you can copy the SQL installation media. There are ways to do it. Now, here's another example, let's say on IaaS naman. So let's say you decide to run SQL Server Enterprise on a Windows Server machine, a Windows Server virtual machine on Azure. Now, let's say you have both SQL Server and Windows Server SA. So this is how it works. If you follow with me from left to right, if you say if you're not using the hybrid benefits, you would pay something like $4 an hour for both SQL Server and Windows. If you apply and during the process of creating the virtual machine, so let's say you indicate that you have Windows SA, that cost goes lower by $3.60 per hour. If you then say, oh, not only do I have SA for Windows, but I also have SA for SQL Server Enterprise Edition, you get a further 85% discount. So that costs, this is illustrated by the way, just as an example, that you get a $3 discount per hour and goes down to almost 60 cents per hour. Now, let's assume that you don't have SA. Let's say you don't have SA, so you're forced or you're compelled to subscribe to a new SQL Server or Windows Server license with SA. Even if you add the cost of SQL Server and Windows SA subscription, that is still a 55% discount compared if you actually create the SQL Server and Windows virtual machine yourself without using any licenses at all. So I hope that example is illustrative of a fact that running Windows Server and SQL Server on Azure is way cheaper than if you do it on Amazon Web Services. And then we have many examples, and there's a website. And then if you don't believe me, just send me an email. Let me know how we can help and how you compute your costs. Um, Azure Hybrid, one of the reasons is because, for example, Azure Hybrid benefit is an exclusive benefit only for Azure customers. Amazon customers do not. So here's another example of SQL Server managed instance naman. So if you go to the Azure portal and create a single instance of an instance of SQL DB managed instance, you will pay something like 544 per hour. If you apply your hybrid benefit, you get a 55% discount. So here's another example wherein let's say you don't have a SA for SQL Server, so therefore you have to subscribe through the portal a SQL Server SA. So you might think, na, I'm paying double for the license because I not only do I have the license, wala nga lang SA, but I'm going to subscribe for the license just to get the SA. The cost is still lower than if you create the managed instance full cost without any license. So in summary, hybrid benefit gives you cost savings. It gives you the flexibility because in some instances you can run the Windows and or SQL Server both on-premise and on the cloud. And this is a service that is unique to Azure, and nobody else has this. Amazon does not have this. Google does. Right. So the main reasons why you want to modernize your 2008 server applications to Azure now is you modernize with cloud innovations. You leverage on the advances that we currently have on Azure, such as the different compute options, the different data services that we currently have on Azure, the different platform and platform as a service to run your code as a service, such as, for example, app services, container services, web app service, mobile app services. You also pay less with Azure because when you migrate, when you move your 2008 EOS platforms to Azure as is, you get free extended security updates, which is only for Azure customers. Amazon customers don't get this. Azure Hybrid Benefit is also unique to Microsoft customers only who has SA. And then you get access to tools to further optimize your infrastructure. So for example, one of the great tools that we have on Azure is something called Azure Cost Management, which continuously analyzes your usage of the cloud and tells you ways on how to further save on costs. You can also then finally improve your security and compliance because you're now running your application on probably the safest and most secure cloud environment ever, built-in multi-layer security controls, and you can go evergreen. You never have to worry about end of support again because especially if you're running on the managed services of Microsoft, we take care of all the security, all the patching, all the backup, all the recovery, and all the upgrading of the base platform to the latest. So you pay less with Azure. AWS is actually 5 times more expensive. If you want to learn more about this, go to aka.ms/y5x more, and it'll give you a lot of examples as to why running Windows and running SQL Server on Azure is way more cost effective than running AWS. So the way to get started with this is to first get an assessment. Get an inventory of your Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 workloads in your environment, and also your SQL Server and even your entire application that depends on these two EOS platforms. You have to run an assessment. If you want to run a free assessment, reach out to me, hrmedia@microsoft.com, or any of our partners. A lot of our partners are currently offering free assessments of your environment to let you know how much it's going to cost and how much effort it will take to migrate all of that to Azure, to migrate all of that to Azure. And then you make a decision on what you want to do as far as migration is concerned. Do you want to lift and shift as is? Do you want to refactor or re-architect your application and modernize it to Azure PaaS? Do you want to remain on-premise but pay for extended security updates just to remain on-premise, just to continue to get security updates? Or do you want to upgrade to the latest Windows or SQL Server SQL Server version. That's entirely up to you. And then optimize. Use the hybrid services to manage your cost and resources, and continually use the tools to let you know and gives you recommendations on how to maximize running on the cloud. So EOS is not going to go away. So SQL Server EOS has in fact happened already. For those of you who are still running SQL Server, rather SQL Server 2018 R2, you are already out of support for close to 1 month already. So you have to take action now. Take this as an opportunity to modernize your data estate and data center infrastructure. There are many ways to stay modern, stay compliant, and because of the hybrid benefits, you get discounts on VMs and managed SQL databases, SQL, and different Azure data services on Azure. And don't do this yourself. Get help from partners. Get help from Microsoft Consulting Services. And for those of you who have Premier support services from Microsoft, talk to your technical account manager to see if you can get a free assessment. And we have partners that actually does a lot of free assessments and they run the tools such as Azure Migrate to figure out what's running in your environment and then make recommendations on what to do as an. So you have to take action now. Okay, determine how many apps and service. That's why I said you need an assessment. Determine which option for you is best to de-risk your business. Get an assessment from Microsoft and partners. And if you have Azure hybrid benefits, try to do simulations using the Azure TCO tool on how much you're going to get as discounts. Or if you don't know if you have Azure hybrid benefits, go ask the original Microsoft partner who sold you those licenses. They will know if you still have active SA or not. Okay. You can still continue to get your Azure free account by going to azure.com/free. Once you've already gotten your free account, you will get a $200 credit and 12 months of popular free services. So your $200 credit remains intact as long as you don't go over the limits here. And these are the services that you get as part of the trial. 750 hours usage of Linux virtual machines, 750 hours usage of Windows virtual machines, and so on. If you go over the limits, then your $200 credit will start going down because we will have to charge you against the credit. These are the different services that will be part of the Azure trial that will continuously be free. We won't charge you for it as long as your trial is still active. When your $200 credit is almost down to zero, you will receive a friendly notification in the portal and also receive an email from Microsoft to ask you if you want to continue using the trial. Because if you say yes, your credit card will now be charged, and now you're now using it in full production trial. Online training is available, so all of our Azure training, we didn't leave anything in the closet, folks. Everything is available online. Now go to Microsoft Learn. So here's the URL at the bottom, where you can just Google Microsoft Learn. And once you go over there, you can select your role. We have specific training material and content just for administrators, engineers, analysts, users, data engineer, data scientists, developers, and solution architects. So select your role from this drop down, and the site will automatically curate and choose the content that's applicable for you. This includes labs as well. We have a specific training school just for people who have aspirations of becoming an AI expert, like people who want to create chatbots using our chat framework, creating applications using our cognitive services, creating advanced machine learning algorithms, and so on. And professional training is also available for free at academy.microsoft.com. So there are several courses such as for data scientists, artificial intelligence, IoT, cybersecurity, big data, data analysis, and so on and so forth. The instructors that you're going to meet here are not just Microsoft people, but a significant portion of those instructors are actually people from NCAD, from University of Washington, and so on. It's a great time to be alive, folks. There's a lot of free training that's available on the web right now, so you can skill yourself up, up your tech intensity so that you can be prepared for the near future, or in a world where people are now running everything. Complete documentation is on Microsoft.docs. Code samples, access to GitHub repositories to get your code samples is also available here. Okay, so that's all the time that we have for this webinar. I spent a lot of time talking about this, but if you are super inclined to, and this format works for you, there are more webinars that are coming, and you see the dates there in front of you. Or the next week, we're going to be talking about How you migrate your entire data center to Azure. It's a big topic, but we're going to use an hour or less than hour less to talk about how you can do that using the tools that we have and using tools in our partners. After that, what is your cloud strategy? This is an interesting webinar to help determine and form your thinking around how you want to think about the cloud and how it can help your business. And you have all the other webinars here at the bottom. Just go to aka.ms/azureph events for you so you can register for these webinars. All right, that's how all the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for listening in wherever you might be, whether you're listening online, live, or on demand. Thank you very much. If you got any more questions, my contacts are right there in the bottom, hrmida@microsoft.com. See you next week, folks. Thank you, and have a great week. Bye-bye.